Hey team, and welcome to another video in our Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we are going to talk about the magical electional opportunities that are going to be available to us between our Pisces Full Moon on September 20th until our Libra New Moon on October 6th. So the good news is that we do have some electional opportunities to talk about for this 2-week period. The bad news is we do not have very many. I only have two for you guys, and it's the same two in each of the three locations. So we're going to do this video a little bit differently, where I'm going to talk about the talismans, and then kind of go through the elections in the three locations before moving on to the second one. But the reason why we only have so many, why we only have these two talismanic elections during this 2-week period, is kind of for the same reasons that we've been struggling to have really good talismans for a while. Saturn and Jupiter are still retrograde, unfortunately. However, they're going to turn direct by the time the sun moves into Scorpio. So we have just a little bit longer, just a little bit more to hold on to before they start to turn direct, and we'll get those two planets back as planets we can work with, that the moon can apply to, planets that can rule the ascendant. So we still have those two planets that are out for repairs, we'll say, and they will be joined by Mercury during this time period as well. Mercury goes retrograde. I don't remember. Mercury goes retrograde on the 27th. So just a few days after our full moon, we will lose. We kind of have already lost Mercury to an extent because you really don't want a stationary or a super slow planet heavily involved in an election unless you have to have it, right? So not only are we still having to deal with the retrograde motion of Jupiter and Saturn and kind of the disqualification of those two planets and the signs that they rule, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, but now Mercury enters the race as another planet that we really can't work with in any kind of constructive way, also taking out its signs Gemini and Virgo as ascendant signs. Adding on to that, not only do we have the retrograde motions of those three planets to worry about, but now Mars has gotten close enough to the sun to be combust. So now Mars is also out of the picture. So the heavens are on fire, and we're just having to kind of sift through the ashes to try to find anything that we can potentially use. And we're also having to deal with a waning moon phase at this time, which is a little bit harder to use constructively. So waning moon phase, retrograde Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn, and combust Mars. Everything is bad. Everything is bad right now. But there is something of a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, as after we finish the retrograde cycles of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury on October 19th, when Mercury stations direct, we'll be in a period of time where all 7 traditional planets are direct until Venus goes retrograde on December 20th. So we have like a 2-month period of everybody being direct, and we're going to make so many talismans. Like, it's going to make your head spin how many talismans we're going to make before Venus goes retrograde. Until then, this is what we have to work with. So our first electional opportunity for this 2-week period is actually going to be for a 4th Lunar Mansion talisman. Now, the 4th Lunar Mansion is kind of a strange one. Well, I guess many talismans are kind of strange, or many of these mansions are kind of strange. But the 4th Lunar Mansion is primarily about the creation of discord, enmity, hatred, and rage. And I kind of feel like there's enough of that going around. So I don't super feel that the 4th Lunar Mansion is a very constructive one. And it's even one that would be difficult to use in a waning moon context, because there's not like a caveat, like an asterisk on it that's like, oh, but it could also be used for the cleansing of those things. Like it can make these things and it can suppress these things. There's actually other mansions that are more for the suppression or the transference or the evaporation of anger, like the 2nd Lunar Mansion. That's really more of its thing. So it really seems like these two powers or intents are kind of separated, to where the 4th Lunar Mansion maybe can't actually really get rid of the anger that it augments. So instead, what ends up happening is the 4th Lunar Mansion tends to be used in a waning moon phase for pest control. One of the utilizations of the 4th Lunar Mansion is to control pests. It's primarily looked at through the lens of like reptiles, I believe, since the image holds a snake in its hand. So there's kind of like this imagery specific for like snakes and reptiles or things that are associated kind of like in the same class as that. But of course, it doesn't have to be. You could change the image to be whatever pest that you are looking to get rid of. And so that's kind of where the astrology here is more focused. Here we're going to utilize a fourth Lunar Mansion talisman for the removal of pests, so pest control, for the eradication of infestations, and overall just making one's living space not attacked by bugs or rats or whatever it is that you are trying to fight off of your living space. So our first election here is going to be for the North American continent. Here it's set for September 24th at around 3 in the morning. 3:05 is what this one is set for. And all of these charts for this is going to look very similar. Just because thankfully a lot of the configurations, a lot of the configurations were very similar throughout all the 3 locations. That's just what we had to work with. So taking a look at our election chart here, we have the moon placed up here in the midheaven, or close to the midheaven in the 4th Lunar Mansion. And here she's separating from this square of Saturn, and she's applying to this opposition of Venus. And I don't think I've ever shown you guys or pointed out electional opportunities or for talismans that featured an applying opposition, because it's just like the worst aspect. But in the situations where we're trying to do like pest control, where we're trying to actually damage things, damage the moon, damage the ascendant, applying the opposition is fine. Like it's kind of what we want. The Venus opposition is a little bit meh, I guess we could say, because Venus is usually more of a benefic planet, so she's not really of the breaking up kind of thing. Like that's not normally her job. But we're really kind of leaning into, so I say that, but what we're really kind of more leaning into to make this work, or to make this like a good pest control talisman, is the moon's square with Saturn, which is separating, but also Saturn's opposition with the ascendant, which is in Leo, which points us to the sun as the ruler of the first house, who is in fall and also conjoined Mars in a cadent house. So that's kind of the layers that we are working with or trying to use in this pest control talisman. The moon's application to Venus isn't the best, isn't the ideal application. The opposition makes it a little better, leaning more into that disharmony or discord that Venus doesn't naturally really sync up with. While also really debilitating the first house and its ruler, which in situations like this represent the pests that we're trying to drive off, or that this talisman is going to work on. So we mess up the ascendant, and we hope that this discourages further infestation. So the Western European version of this chart is very similar, but just kind of turned 90 degrees to the side. Here we have the moon in the 4th Lunar Mansion in the ascendant, where in the previous one she was on the midheaven, still separating from the square of Saturn, and applying much more tightly to the opposition of Venus in this chart here in the 7th house in Scorpio. Because we've kind of tilted the chart differently, we now have different signs pointing us to different planets as representing our kind of key players. So in the previous chart in North America, it was Leo on the ascendant, which pointed us down to the Sun-Mars conjunction. Here we've got here we have Taurus on the ascendant, which points us to this Venus in Scorpio. So we are still, again, pointing to a planet that is in low essential dignity. Venus is debilitated in Scorpio. Venus is also square Saturn in Aquarius. So here we're kind of again leaning into the difficulty. We're leaning into the difficulty that Venus is experiencing as the ruler of the first house, and the moon is kind of helping to translate to an extent. We're kind of getting this double up of the Saturn square. Venus is separating from it, but the moon is going to bring it back to Venus, if that makes sense. Sort of redoubling up or trying again. So this might be an especially effective talisman if you are working with some sort of infestation or pest that you have combated once before but has now returned. This could be another kind of second try kind of talismanic energy. And for the Australian version of this chart, it is September 24th at 21:22, so a little bit before 9:30 at night. And this one looks more similar to the Western European version than it does to the North American one. Here we've got the moon back on the midheaven. Here we have the moon back on the ascendant. She's separating from the square of Saturn, applying to the opposition of Venus. Venus rules the first house, who is debilitated in Scorpio, also square this Saturn. So has not only is debilitated in the sign that she's in, but also afflicted by Saturn and the square, with the moon bringing that back through translation as well. So kind of a very similar setup to that Western European version. This might be a good opportunity or a good try, like a second try, for some sort of infestation that you fought before, whether like ants keep coming back or whatever it is. This might be really great for trying again to deal with that, to keep it from coming back a third potential time. So our second and final electional opportunity for this 2-week period, unfortunately, is going to be for a 9th Lunar Mansion talisman. And the 9th Lunar Mansion is one that is a little bit more classically a cursed talisman. But here we are kind of utilizing it more for the defensive, maybe the little bit more offensive defensive side of the talismanic spirit. The 9th Lunar Mansion is primarily about protection, like spiritual defenses, whether that is from sort of like more common conceptions of like bad luck to a little bit more of a step up from like accidental cursing inherent in things like the evil eye to like more intentionally sinister cursing or hexing sort of activities. So the 9th Mansion can be very useful for these kinds of protections. It can also be useful for casting those things at others, which I do not recommend, of course, and these charts I don't think would be set up very good for that anyway, because we're trying to work more with the bouncing, reflecting, kind of like sort of modality of spiritual protection with the 9th Lunar Mansion than we are anything more intentionally aggressive. So if that's really more what you're looking for, this probably isn't going to be it. So taking a look at our election here, we have the moon in the first house, in the 9th Lunar Mansion, and at this time she's applying this trine to Venus in Scorpio in the 5th. Of course, Venus in Scorpio is not necessarily the most ideal placement because Venus does not really do well in Scorpio, but as a benefic planet who is inherently capable of protecting and defending, Venus is a really great choice for this kind of talisman, and the trine aspect is much more helpful, much more supportive for these kinds of endeavors than than that opposition that we had to work with in the 4th Lunar Mansion, which was a little bit more weaponized, like intentionally there. Here, we're not really weaponizing the 9th Lunar Mansion, or outside of the context of like a shield, if you count a shield as a weapon, which I guess I would. It still hurts when you hit somebody with it, though it's usually more of like protective kind of thing. So that's really more what we're leaning into here. This trine, of course, and this trine also hits the ascendant degree as well, kind of helping to further support that that protection of the self, protection of the body. So all in all, a pretty decent election here. We don't really have to worry about the square with Mars. Here, it's Mars. We don't really have to worry about the square of Mars because it's kind of far out. But that will be something to be worried about in later locations. The Western European version of this chart takes place on September 30th at just after 12:30 at night. I have this set for 0:36, and it's very similar to the North American version. Here we've got the moon in the 9th Lunar Mansion conjoined the ascendant, still applying that trine to Venus here in Scorpio. What is that line? Applying this trine to Venus in Scorpio. Again, Venus as a benefic planet is capable of and wants to shield and protect in like a non-offensive, non-harmful manner, rather than say like an application to Mars or something would. So we can kind of lean into that more hugging, I guess, shielding and protecting, more supportive, intentionally supportive, protective aspect that we can get from Venus there. Kind of like I said before, in the West or in the North American version, we weren't super worried about the square of Mars. But here we're a little bit worried about it, and that's why the ascendant is, I try to stick it like to 17-ish degrees, to get a good distance between the ascendant degree and the square of Mars, which will run somewhere between like 4 degrees Libra to 14-ish. 4 degrees Cancer to 14-ish degrees Cancer, depending on how far of an orb you give it. I usually give 5 degrees on either side, which cancels out a whole 10-degree section. So that's why we pushed it to about 17 degrees Cancer, whereas in other versions of the chart, it was a little bit earlier. And finally, the 9th Lunar Mansion chart for Australia is going to be for September 30th at around 2 in the morning. 2:07 is what this chart is set for here. And a very, very, very similar familiar setup. Moon in the 9th Mansion on the ascendant, applying that trine to Venus in Scorpio, leaning into the protective aspects of a benefic planet as much as we can, and being mindful of our ascendant degree not being square Mars. Like I said, I personally give it about a 5-degree orb on the other side. So 15 degrees is like literally just a step out from that boundary. If you want to push this back a little bit, the ascendant degree back a little bit, you absolutely can. But you don't want to push it too far and have the moon fall off of the ascendant into the 12th house. But alrighty, those were all the whole grand total of 2 electional opportunities that I had to share with you guys for this 2-week period. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry I didn't have more for you. I don't really get to make the rules. I just tell you guys about them. But it's definitely times like this that make me wish I had specialized in a different kind of magical practice or paradigm. But, you know, it's fine to have a break sometimes. It's fine to take a step back and think about what it means when the heavens aren't actually that well situated for most types of magic, and how we as magicians or theurgists or whatever you want to call us can still operate to some extent within that more difficult flow or course of quality of time. But hopefully once these planets start to go direct, we will have much more opportunities to share with you guys. The lunar mansions are really great to work with on a more, daily personal level, but I would also like to start seeing us being able to do, planetary talismans or fixed star talismans. It's been a minute, I think, since we've been able to have like a really good example of those. So hopefully we'll start to see this coming around down the corner, especially as Saturn in Aquarius goes direct. Hopefully we'll start seeing things line up for that. But everybody take care, and I'll see you all again on the Libra New Moon.